Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a well known and respected designer from Pune, Ashwini Deshpande. Ashwini, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. Ashwini is the co founder and director of Elephant, which is India's top ranked independent integrated design consultancy. She's been recognized and felicitated several times, given all the amazing work that she's been doing. So, my first question for you, Ashwini, what inspired you to pursue visual communication design at NID and eventually co found Elephant over 3 decades ago?
So, of course, the story goes back to my childhood, and I think I was always fascinated by visuals and colors and patterns and textures.
Hmm.
And when I was growing up, there was no television. And so one always got exposed to print advertising, print communication,
Yeah.
paintings. My parents had a large social circle, and there were artists and poets and writers and so on.
Hmm.
So I got exposed to all these, which were not careers then, but all these, amazingly talented people. And I also got exposed to the idea that you don't have to do something which is, at that time it was just medical and engineering.
Correct.
And I think my parents were very, very open to an idea of me pursuing any other career or anything at all.
Hmm.
So that's how my love for visual storytelling sort of cropped up. And, I grew up in Aurangabad. And Aurangabad in the 60s and 70s, there was very little exposure.
Hmm.
There would barely be, let's say, one English movie, few books, and so on.
Hmm.
But as luck may have it, we got to know of NID, and my parents took that decision of sending me all the way to another state, and I got into NID. Of course, when I went to NID, I had no idea what design was. It was just a shot.
Hmm.
It was like I didn't want to do the conventional. I like my drawing, creativity, and let's see what this is. Uh, but once I got there and we did the foundation course, which sort of exposes you to all disciplines of design,
Hmm.
I was advised by my good teachers that you would do well in visual communication. So that's really how I got into that field
Hmm.
with
Amazing.
a little idea of what I would do later. But yeah, that's how
Absolutely.
it happened.
Absolutely. And as you look back, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced as a young design entrepreneur in India when design was not fully recognized as a business enabler?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are talking about late 80s, right? And it wasn't the time that people queued up outside campuses for recruitments or any such thing. So really speaking, we had nowhere to apply.
Hmm.
There were no design consultancies, no companies, no international companies had even
Yeah.
looked at India and so on. So we were going through, in our final year, we were going through a course on design management,
Hmm.
professionalism, and so on. One of the IIM professors was taking it, and one of the exercises was a group activity to form your own consultancy, to understand how businesses run, how money comes in, goes, what is HR policies, etc.
Hmm.
And while doing that, there was this eureka moment that
Hmm.
few of us friends who were doing it together, we said, hey, it's not like we have any other great options. So why don't we do this?
Hmm.
It seems like a thing. So that's how it was born. And I think we were always clear that design is not a solo game. Design is not art.
Hmm.
It's not your self-expression. It's something that you do to solve other people's problems and most likely for a large set of people.
Hmm.
Because NID was, it came from this socialist mindset
Hmm.
that design must do good for a very large community.
Yeah.
So we said that it's not a solo game, it's a team game. And what is that legendary story from India? Long, long ago, there was this tiny village which had six blind people. And when they heard an elephant is passing by, each of them went and touched a part
Yeah.
and came back
Hmm.
thinking he's very knowledgeable, right? And
Hmm.
of course, as Indians love to argue, they argued it's a wall, it's a rope, it's a tree, and so on. But then came a person who said that, what, you put all your pieces together and it's a big picture.
Hmm.
So we said that's really what we want to do to design in India.
Hmm. Hmm.
All of us had our tiny piece of jigsaw puzzle, but it would be completed by the users, by clients, by manufacturers, by retailers, and so on. So, yeah, we will form that big picture of design in India. And that
Hmm.
really was the the spirit, and it remains the same even after 36 years, that we
Hmm.
believe it's a collaborative game.
Wow, what a fascinating story of how you decided on the name elephant. And yet it's such a common story, but you put it uh, together into an organization, bringing together all the different perspectives. Thank you. Ashwini, you've also been featured among the most influential women in media for over a decade. How do you balance recognition with responsibility?
This is a very interesting question because early on, when we started getting, let's say, smaller, bigger awards for our work, and I would come home and feel very proud of what we achieved, etc. This is like really early years, but we were getting recognized.
Hmm.
And I remember a very interesting anecdote or quote from my father's conversation. He said that, uh, well, my father has been a cricketer, so he has
Hmm.
seen a lot of wins and losses. He's no
Hmm.
more. So every cricket match used to be either a victory or a loss, and then
Hmm.
you have to get on with it and play the next one, right? So he said that you have to learn to acknowledge your success,
Hmm.
but wear it very lightly. So I think that was quite an eye opener because most of the times, many of us, when we are complimented,
Hmm.
we try to brush it aside and we try to not take the credit and we try to sort of let it slip us. And when you let it slip, it doesn't even leave you with the responsibility.
Hmm.
So the idea is you don't let it slip. You acknowledge that, yes, I have achieved something, but that also gives me a responsibility to give back something,
Hmm.
and the power to give back something.
Hmm.
Because when you become somebody recognized, you have the voice, or you can use your voice for better things.
Hmm.
So I think that's the way I looked at success. And I was never ambitious for myself. I was always fiercely ambitious for Elephant.
Hmm.
So I think that's really been the journey. And if you talk to anybody at Elephant over the years or even today, it is never a I, it is always a we,
Wow.
because that really is the philosophy.
Wow. What a fascinating response. Thank you. How do you define branding in today's context where everything is digital, global, and fast paced?
I think fast pace is the biggest challenge because I believe our concentration span has really reduced to like a 4 seconds or 9 seconds, or I don't even know what the
Correct.
number is today.
Correct.
So what then matters is, and this I can say only because that's the one learning I've had over the years, that you have to show up and be consistent.
Hmm.
So a brand has to show up, not just show up because it can, but because it has something to say,
Hmm.
and it should be consistent. Whatever it is saying, whatever is the proposition, whatever is the promise, if it's consistent, and I don't just mean in communication, but in what they do or what they make or how they behave.
Hmm.
So it's like when I see brands celebrating a Pride Month, just giving an example, and then they don't have gender equality policies in their company,
Hmm.
but as an advertisement, they are selling the Pride Month and they are
Hmm.
coloring their logo.
Correct.
That's not how a brand can be actually respected or built.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's really what I would say, show up and be consistent.
Very well said. You also worked, Ashwini, with global brands across diverse segments. What distinguishes a good brand identity from a truly iconic one? And give me an example if you can.
This is a little tough one because it's a very thin line between a good brand and an iconic one.
Correct.
And iconic ones are very few.
Yeah.
And while every brand starts believing they will become iconic, it's very difficult to do that.
Correct.
So I
Correct.
think good brands have everything right in the sense they have clarity of communication, they have clarity of purpose, they have, they're doing all the right things.
Hmm.
But an iconic brand is usually born out of a cultural insight. It is usually born out of something that has been deeply observed, is deeply ingrained in the societies that it's going to serve. And it comes out of that rooted cultural insight or nuance.
Hmm.
And good brands often struggle to do that.
Hmm.
So, an iconic brand, like, I mean, we all talk about these brands all the time, but why are they iconic? Because, like an Apple or a Coke or a Johnson and Johnson, mother's love is universal, right?
Hmm.
Now, no matter what products you're giving, but that whole insight that mother's love is timeless.
Correct.
That's an insight, right?
Correct.
Or for Apple. You want technology to be as easy as biting into an apple. You
Mm,
don't want to know what happens behind the scenes. It's not needed, right, for
mm,
you to use the technology. So Apple made it that simple. So
mm,
I think these are some uh, cultural nuances that are timeless. They are universal. They don't just happen in one geography, but they're actually
mm,
across the world. Those become iconic.
mm.
Very difficult to give you an example of an Indian iconic brand. I wish they were a handful. But I think some of our brands have also achieved
Correct. I
some
agree.
degree of status.
I agree.
Some of the Tata brands, I would say, and then some of the very young startup brands that are now over a decade, let's say, and they are
Mm,
trying to establish something interesting in the world. I think those would also count within that.
absolutely.
And yeah.
Absolutely. Well said. But tell me, what are some of the biggest misconceptions marketers have about design and branding?
One of the most difficult one to crack is that everybody believes design is a cosmetic
Correct.
change or it's a cosmetic makeover.
Mm,
And the way, in fact, how I see our journey is that we started getting, of course, in the early days, just to get a project was an achievement. Just to
mm,
get a design project where a client is willing to pay you design fees was an achievement, and that was
mm,
fine.
mm,
So we started with the outer layer, I think. So we started getting projects where it was just in our internal lingo, we call it prettify.
mm,
You just, you're called at the moment when things need to be prettified. And then that's the job you do, and you do
mm.
that well because we
Yeah.
are trained to do that. But as we were trained to ask questions, I think the biggest vice a designer has is the curiosity.
Mm,
And we could never keep our curiosity down. So even when we were called to just do a surface level intervention, we would ask
mm,
so many questions.
mm,
And some of those would be then understood as, hey, these guys genuinely seem to know something more or are able to do something or understand something.
mm,
So I think then we started getting called for maybe just an inner layer and an inner layer and so on.
mm,
And as designers dream of being in the boardroom, right? I think that started happening over the years.
mm,
So from understanding design as a cosmetic change to
mm,
design as a systemic change to design not as a department to be established, but design is the whole thing
mm,
as a mindset. I think that change has happened around now, and I won't say it's happened everywhere, but yeah, now we do get called in the boardrooms more
mm.
often than not. I also serve as an independent director on a public limited company. So that degree of travel has happened, shift has happened.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. But the other aspect of storytelling when it comes to brand communication
Mhm.
is the multiplicity of cultures that we have in our country. And therefore, the communication has to resonate across cultures.
Yeah.
How do you handle something like this?
That is the most joyous part of being an Indian,
Yeah.
that the stories are never ending. There are just so many stories. You just have to look and there'll be a story for it.
Mm,
And these stories we are an oral culture. So many of these stories are not even documented. They've
correct.
just been passed on from generations. Uh, so I think you have to, it's actually you could look at it as a problem and be stuck, or you could look at it as a treasure trove of experiences that you
Mm,
can give to your audiences. And if you see how world is shifting now and how we have exposure to everything that's happening around the world,
mm,
technology is an equalizer. We know exactly what litti chokha tastes being in Maharashtra, but you have access to some food from Bihar.
mm,
And similarly, somebody sitting in Northeast knows what is pitla bhakri from Maharashtra.
correct.
So these are, I mean, food means stories for us. So I'm just giving an
Mm,
example of
yeah,
food,
yeah,
but there are
absolutely.
everything has a story of right from personal care to medicines to food to everything to
Absolutely.
fashion.
Mm,
So I think it's a treasure trove we are sitting on, and the more we use it for storytelling, the better for a brand.
mm,
So
mm.
we just love the fact that these stories are being discovered and heard now.
Absolutely right. And tell me, how is technology changing the role of design in branding and communication?
So if you're referring to AI, I'm guessing you're referring to
He is one
AI.
of them, but I mean, I remember, I was a young marketing guy in 1979 when I finished business school,
Hmm.
and it was very different. I used to sit with agencies, and today, with the onset of computers was the first, but
Hmm.
today it's AI, of course.
So this whole multiplicity of culture and storytelling remains,
Mm,
and that
mm,
I think is not something that technology can actually do much about. So storytelling has to happen by human beings.
correct.
So I would say this will be the rise of design strategy
Mm,
more than design execution. So if
mm,
I were to just look at our field, execution is greatly supported by or taken over by technology.
mm,
You don't really need to be an amazing painter, sketcher, etc. Technology can do that for you. But what is the story you're going to tell? And why are you telling that story? And is that going to resonate with the audience that you're telling that story
mm,
to? So
mm,
I would say the strategy is something that designers now need to sharpen even more, pay
mm,
more attention to. Strategy leading to storytelling, not just documents and documents or manuals of strategy.
mm,
Strategy that can work for people, and then leave the execution to technology. So I would say it sort of liberated many of us who were bogged down by the fact that we have to do the execution
mm.
ourselves. I came from the generation which didn't really have, well, we bought our first computer a year after we sat at Elephant.
Correct.
And we were one of the first creative agencies to buy a computer from that to now. So I think it's a liberation for us. People who don't want to spend a lot of time in execution but want to get it perfect, but are
Mm,
keen on telling stories.
mm.
So I think designers need to be mindful of strategy much more
Absolutely.
than ever.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But the other thing that is also happening, one is technology, but the other thing that's happening is
Yeah,
that attention span is reducing dramatically.
true.
From a 30-second to a 1 minute clip to cinema advertising to billboards in my time. Today, everything is few seconds.
Yes.
How can brands still build deep emotional connects with audiences in with such short attention spans?
So, that is what we say, love at first sight. How
Correct.
long does that first sight take?
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
we have always known that something can work in a fraction of a second.
Hmm.
We just now need to learn how to do that and
Hmm.
how to do that with purpose, with like intention, with precision. But an emotion can be moved in just a second. I don't
Hmm.
think that's not new.
Yeah.
So whenever somebody from our social media team comes and says that, this so and so reel was watched only 9 seconds or only 4 seconds as an average, I always tell them this one simple thing that, love does happen in one side. So, what are we complaining about? We have to learn to
Hmm.
tell that story in that one
Correct.
second, 2 seconds, whatever that is.
Correct.
But you can tell that powerfully only if you have understood what is it that you're saying.
Hmm.
If there is no insight, you're not addressing an insight,
Hmm.
then you won't be able to tell a powerful story
Well
in
said.
even 30 seconds.
Well said. Well said. Ashwini, you also collaborated with designers from 11 Asian countries.
Yes.
What have been your learnings from cross-cultural design experiences?
So, when we were studying design, the institution always looked at, well, we had professors who had learned in Basel, Switzerland, and Bauhaus, and so on.
Hmm.
And so the design actually came from the West for us, even though it was always taught with a strong layer of being Indian and Indianness.
Hmm.
So we sort of somehow never got exposed to Asian design.
Hmm.
But again, I say we've been very fortunate that we came across this design alliance, which is the group of designers from 11 countries,
Hmm.
where we did a collective project. And when you start looking at Asian design, what is really interesting is that the whole of Asia is so full of rich with stories, rich with cultural nuances, rich with rituals, very interesting stories and so on, very interesting objects, very interesting meaning
Hmm.
to various things that we do, colors, materials, architecture, food, and so on. So that is really what we learned through that project. I co-curated a project called Colors of Asia,
Hmm.
which was funded by government from Hong Kong,
Hmm.
and it culminated into an exhibition, a book, and a seminar, a conference. And all of us worked to understand how we see color. And through that, what I learned is that countries like Singapore,
Hmm.
which have far sharper definition of doing anything.
Hmm.
They are very crystal clear. Their timelines are sharp, focused, and so on. On the other hand, there are other countries which don't have that sharpness of delivery or focus, but they are far more interesting because their
Mm.
storytelling is far more interesting.
Right.
So countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Laos,
Mm.
Malaysia, and also interestingly, somebody goes deeper into heritage, somebody goes deeper into storytelling, somebody is deep into craft.
Mm.
So each designer brought in their own sort of
Yeah.
strength
Yeah.
to this whole thing.
Mm.
And what we learned is collectively you can actually create magic. So I think again, it's the story of elephant.
Very
So we say
interesting.
that the
Yeah.
more the blind people, the better for anything.
Mm.
So I
Fascinating.
think I just met that many more blind people.
I know. Fascinating. You're also the co-founder of the collective and a mentor to Indian creative women. How do you see gender dynamics shaping the creative industry?
If you see just design and design
Mm.
in India, and very surprisingly, this is a very different statistics than you would see in the West.
Mm.
That many design and branding agencies have women at as their heads.
Correct.
So I think we have crossed that path long ago.
Mm.
And I'm very happy to say that I am among many of those women who've been, crossing those paths and not really looking at
Mm.
ceilings, etc. Nobody's bothered about a ceiling anymore.
Yeah.
But that's not really true in all the creative fields. So
Mm.
if you look at advertising agencies, or if you look at media agencies, or if you look at filmmaking companies, it's not been that easy.
Mm.
Unfortunately, many of the top creative women in very large global ad agencies are assigned brands that are women centric.
Mm.
So why can't a woman actually advertise for or create communication for a car brand
Correct.
or a technology brand or anything at all?
Mm. Mm.
So I think women in communication have had it a bit raw compared
Mm.
to design.
Mm.
So I would say there the sort of pace is kind of slow, but it's changing.
Mm.
And the new generation that's coming in, both men, women, have been mindful of this fact that everybody has something to bring into a story. And
Mm.
it's not just men who can do tech brands, and it's not just women who can do personal care and so on.
Yeah.
So I think the lines are blurring, the
Mm.
dynamics are shifting rapidly.
Mm.
So we will actually see a very different scenario in a couple of years, not even
Amazing.
5 years.
I'm sure. I have time for two more questions for you, Ashwini.
Hmm.
Can you share an example of a branding project where design
Hmm.
directly impacted business results? And you don't have to give me names, you could just give me the story.
I could give you names as well.
Okay, okay.
Uh,
That's perfect.
yeah, well, of course, the tragedy of doing good work is that clients don't tell you that your work resulted in so much more business
Mm.
because they believe that next time you'll come with a fatter fee, and they
Yes.
don't want to give you that. But what's been really fascinating is working with startups. Because of course, we've had the fortune to work with very large global companies as well as Indian conglomerates and so on. But when you work with a really large company, to see design making a difference and to
Mm.
to find a tangible fact that design made this percentage of difference is very difficult
Mm.
because they have their brand built already, they have their media in place, they have their PR in place, and so on. So you don't know how much design did, right?
Yeah.
But when you work with a startup who had nothing
Mm.
and then they become something, you can definitely see that some of it has been played out because of design.
Correct. Correct.
So, couple of examples. One is my favorite example, which is Paperboat.
Mm.
Uh, and it's not only a differentiated product range, which they started with, which they said we want to do ethnic drinks. And we said, okay, who's your competition? They said nobody.
Mm.
And they had the guts to say nobody and don't look at anybody. We are going to be different. We could reciprocate with design that was so differentiated that it became a category by itself.
Yeah.
So I think, and they did no advertising for first several years. They had no budgets for
Mm.
advertising. So the only thing that they had was the pack on the shelf or
Yeah.
pack in the airline.
Mm.
And that made all the difference. And that brought in whatever traction it did. And it was a joy to see that
Correct.
because people knew even today after 12 years, I could tell them I work for Daimler-Benz or I work for Tata. But when I say I work for Paperboat, there is a twinkle in the eye. And
Absolutely.
I think it's not just business then, it's a joy as well. So as
Mm.
designers, we don't just want to increase numbers, right? We want to give delight. So I
Mm.
think that's one example. And the other one is more recent, and let's see how that pans out. But it's a brand called Wicked Good
Mm-hmm.
of noodles and pasta,
Mm.
but healthy. So no maida, no palm oil, etc. And the habit of eating noodles is not going away anywhere. That's been
Mm.
established by a really large brand in a really good way.
Mm.
But just the other day, just last week on Amazon, we saw that this brand is at number three.
Wow.
And that's again a joy because yeah, India wants to eat healthy, but we've created a brand that is not boring. It's fun to have and it's healthy.
Mm. Fascinating.
So I think these
Yeah.
little
These are both amazing
sparkles along the
examples.
way are just joy.
Absolutely. And I've interviewed the founder of Paperboat on my show also many years ago. Uh,
Oh,
but
great.
but my
Okay.
last question for you, Ashwini, what role do you
Mhm.
see Indian design playing on the global stage in the coming few years?
I have represented Indian design on so many global conferences and
Yes.
platforms, and every time this question comes up, that what is the Indian style of design?
Hmm.
Because there is a Japanese style of design, and there's a Scandinavian style of
Hmm.
design, and so on. There's an Italian design, and so on. And all these years, I don't think I could tell enough, or I had the credits to say enough. But Indian design style is the fact that it has no one style. You cannot contain it in one style. It's the
Hmm.
multiplicity which is the core promise of Indian design. And I think
Hmm.
that's really what the world is waking up to now. We've just seen just a couple of days ago, we've seen the New York mayor using
Yeah.
design in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I think Indian design or rooted design or cultural multiplicity has come of age now. We
Hmm.
no more have to be shy of our chaos and colors and patterns. In fact, we can wear them very proudly now,
Correct.
and so is the world. World is ready for it.
Hmm.
So I think we've never been boring. We've always been original. We've just been a little shy of showing it off.
Showing it.
Now the time has come. So I think
Absolutely.
it's really the time of Indian design.
Absolutely. And on that note, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been with you. I've been a part of the marketing, the large companies for many years, and I've seen how design has evolved, and you have really reinforced how design has been such an integral part of building brands and continues to be a part of building brands. And as you say, rightly, it's much more out in the open, much more expressive. And given the huge canvas that we have in our country with the diversity of languages, cultures, food habits, everything is different, and yet we are part of one country. I think what is there for Indian design is something really incredible. And I've seen what impact design is making all over the world. But thank you again for speaking to me, Ashwini, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashutosh. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.